Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Vision X Live 2021 event. This is day two of the conference. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm very excited. Of course, this is the day two. So yesterday we had a conversation with Olga Krimon talking about specifically about copper and archivalness of copper and her techniques into it. So I suggest if you haven't seen that one yet, double up on that one because all three of the events that we're going to be doing are actually going to fit in together. So of course, yesterday we talked to Olga. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking to Casey Childs about large-scale panels and what different problems those present. And today, of course, we're excited to have Suchitra Bhosle on. Hi, Suchitra.
Hi there. How are you?
I'm so good. Thank you so much for joining. Suchitra is an ambassador
Awesome.
for our brand. She uses a lot of Artefex panels. She has a whole lot of work that she's done on Artefex panels, but also in general. So she has a lot of experience working on different kinds of surfaces. So today we're going to really delve deep into talking to her about what she likes, some of the problems she's encountered over her career, and then of course we're gonna finish with a little presentation about some of the testing that we've done on different panels, and then just show some differences between all the different kinds of art surfaces that are out there. First of all, welcome if you're on Facebook or on YouTube. Hello. If you are on the Zoom meeting on the Vision X Live, make sure that you go to the right corner of your screen. And the best way to view this is side by side speaker. Okay, so that way you can see Suchitra, you can see me, you can also see our moderator, where he's going to have different pictures, either of Suchitra's work or some of the panels that I'm going to be talking about. That way it's just a little easier for you to follow along as we're discussing some of the panels. So the easiest way to start, I think, is just to start talking to you a little bit about some of your experiences, Suchitra.
Right.
So I have the first question I have was, have the tools you've used throughout your career significantly changed, and is that a good thing?
Great question. Yes, I think over the years I've started with like the basic stuff that one couldn't afford to buy. Just like really like less quality wise. But I was told earlier on in the game that it's good to have your focus on good materials and good practices, of course. So I think having doesn't mean necessarily expensive, but good materials that will be archival, long lasting are very important. So
Right.
I think I've always stuck to that end of the game and got myself the best things. And over the years, I've noticed that my confidence in the way I've been painting has increased, multifold like 5 years, it's so I've noticed that been a certain progression with the way I've been painting and the kind of surface I've been using. So it's very interesting, that whole relationship, because I used to like a lot of, kind of a ground that was a little 2D, and it was great for plein air painting, like landscapes. But of course, and I soon learned that, having that real bravura brushwork and everything that I like to do, which I started growing into. I mean, I had a certain nervous system, I suppose. I still have that, which lends for me to paint on surfaces that like will totally showcase that brushwork, like just clearly, And I think over the years, with the canvas surface itself, I've actually moved on from that little more of a, tooth of having like a C13 or a C15 kind of a portrait grade Belgian linen to now a really smooth lead prime, which is what I like about the one I use of you guys. Is it's the lead prime. I don't know if it's triple prime, the double prime, but it's like fine, really soft, and all of these paintings that you're showing is pretty much done on that very fine, sorry, excuse me here, very fine surface. So I think even the tools wise, like the kind of brushes I've used has changed over the years, but the marriage between the brush and the canvas, I think that has kind of opened up the game for me. Like just knowing the right kind of brush, like bristles to a softer surface, can make the marks a little more, like you've noticed my work, it has a lot of that brush mark that I leave behind. And the lead prime, linen does that, actually helps me achieve that sort of a look and feel, especially in like the transparent washes and those kind of areas. So yeah, I think over the years I have moved to a little more smoother slightly slicker surface. So yeah.
And so basically, as your skill kind of increased, you've figured out, you've kind of narrowed down exactly what you're looking for to make it a little tighter, so then you don't have to worry about different things as you're painting. You can just
Right. I like even sable brushes. Like the sable are so soft, and like they give you that beautiful wispy, light touch wispy feeling on a like a lead prime. But if I want to really get that like just nice bold brushwork, then I'm going for the bristle brush, like with a frayed edge, and that marriage between that mark making and the surface. I've over the years I've figured that out for me, but I'm still kind of figuring it out. But I like the way my paintings are starting to read now, much more looser, and has that like it just got that slippery quality. And I think it's the 538 or 528. Is that the surface we work on? I usually like.
Yeah, you have a couple you like, but 532s you normally your
is
favorite.
my favorite.
Like,
yeah,
extra fine. Yeah.
And then there's another one which which is it's a linen, but it's pasted on, not like the aluminum thing. Like I don't know if this painting I can share with you. Let me get that out. Like this surface is different. I'm not sure. This is a 533. So this I don't know if you can tell, but like it's got a little more of a little bit of a tooth, but it's still it still has a nice soft surface for the brush to so it leaves behind a lot of these beautiful brush marks, which is what I like, if you can see, right?
I can't. Yeah, and the 533 is a very popular one. In fact, so the 533 is probably more popular because of that exact quality you're saying, where it has a little bit more texture.
Like you can, this has got a little more texture than say the 532. Is that the one which is lead prime? And is this lead? This is lead prime too, isn't it?
Those are all lead prime linens.
They're all okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah. So that is pretty much
and now that we're talking about that particular panel, one of the qualities that I know a lot of people like about that one is that it's probably the least absorbent canvas panel, oil prime canvas panel. I think most people have tried. Is that true in your experience, or have you?
Which one, the 533 or the 532?
Either one of those, but 532 probably mostly.
It's less. Oh yeah, it's not absorbent at all. I mean, I like the way it all sits right on top. I think that's why most people who ask me, your brushwork is so loose and all that. I mean, it's not to do with so much with only the brush. I think, like I said, it's a marriage. No, I mean, it's got to be like the way when the brush touches the surface, you have a certain effect that happens. And if you're over painting things, obviously you're going to lose that effect, because it's that first spontaneous stroke that you put down. And I think most of my work has that quality, which is I'm always trying to be very brief with my expression. And this particular, the lead prime one, I feel like all the brushwork sits right on top. It just sits on top, and then I can play with that surface with the edge work or what have you, but not ruin that effect, because it sits right on top of each other. So even if I put another stroke down on top of the first, I think it tends to like have that layered look, which is kind of what I like with my work anyway.
Very cool.
And it's got a lot to do with the lead prime fine, smooth surface, I feel. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, the lead just is a little less absorbent, which is I think why it has been one of the most popular panels. For studio work, maybe not plein air, where you actually want it to sink in, you want it to dry,
right. Yeah. And I think for plein air, I think this particular 533, or I don't know if there's another. I think I might have tried another little more coarser weave, and that really lent to like where you do like landscapes outdoor, or even like I could do a portrait or figurative on it too. And it's not that it's got a different effect. Like, especially if you want to leave really impasto brushwork, it really grabs your paint, which is what I like in the one which has texture. So I think for landscape painting, I've noticed that I can like push the paint and it'll grab it, and it sits right on top still. Again, when I do plein air, I think I don't paint the way I paint portraits and figurative. So it's interesting because that's more like direct, and it's like you don't have much time. The light's changing on you, so you are spontaneous to the second. Like you just put down things, and then they just sit on top of each other. So I think that tooth helps grab the paint down, and it builds. You can build on top of it, right? But with the lead, I feel like when you put it down, it's so beautiful and it's like with that slippery, feel. And if you start to put too much paint on it, it's like you're ruining that look and feel that's done on a lead primed panel. So I think different surfaces get you to paint differently. And I think also to do a lot with how you feel. I mean, I think my way of painting is a little more bold and more direct and more spontaneous. So I kind of like something that will just give me that effect right away. And I think that's why the lead prime panel for me does that. It brings that really nice juiciness to the brushwork, and you want to leave it alone. You don't want to mess with it and make it look like it was overworked. So you lose the effect otherwise. So yeah.
Absolutely. It's interesting that one of the things that you said was that different surfaces will kind of almost force you or allow you to try different things on them. I think we touched on that a little bit with Olga yesterday, where she talked about transitioning to copper, which is obviously very different. And then you yourself said trying something with more weave, maybe allows different kinds of brushworks. And I actually find that a lot with a lot of people who use us exclusively, is that they'll have 3 or 4 different panels that they'll cycle through, depending on whether it's a really large work where they don't want to have tiny details that fill in,
right,
or if it's really small or whatever, or what have you.
Yeah.
But
like this painting you're showing, sorry, Andrew, this painting that you just showed, because I don't want to lose that moment of explaining that how the brushwork of this particular, I think this is probably a lead primed as well. And it's just that you see all these passages in the shadow where basically the bottom half of the canvas, it's got that sort of a how to explain it, it's more little windows of washes coming through the cooler tones, right? The warmth coming through, and you can get that really beautifully on a lead. You won't get it when you have too much of a tooth, because then you get a drag and you get a dry brush, look and feel. And this is more like it sits on top, but it still gives you that layered look and feel. You got to do it to try it out to know what I'm saying. I think that's really what that is. Yeah.
Gotcha. Do you have certain tools that you particularly enjoy that you don't change, but think that you would benefit from changing? An old brush, maybe an easel, or certain canvases that are just like a habit that you really like?
So it's a cool question, because it's really funny what's happened to me over the years, Anton. I started with the really good brushes and the flats and the rosemaries. I mean, everyone was like this whole thing of rosemary, which is great. Like, I didn't have them, I couldn't afford them before, but then when I was buying them, it was all about the great brushes. But over the years, it's hilarious. I've been starting to move towards raggedy brushes. More the raggedy, the more the destroyed, the better. I don't want that clean look, that really neat look, because I'm not that sort of a painter. I don't like something that looks very perfect and hyper realism. That's just not me. But for someone else who obviously likes to paint tighter and more I guess, more realistic, then you need to have brushes that are obviously not going to do any crazy things without your control or without your permission. So it's when I'm painting and these raggedy brushes, I've noticed a lot of the fan brushes or filberts that have gone overused. I am actually enjoying, I'm moving away from perfection to just happy accidents. And just kind of it's happens when you don't of who you are, as a person. I think if you're the kind of person who's bold and fearless, and and that translates into your work as well. You don't really you're not fearful of who will say what, right? So you just go for it. So my tools have actually changed for if someone looks at my brushes oh gosh, these are the craziest brushes I've seen. So I'm actually moving towards destroyed brushes. So I'm holding on to all those old brushes and just hoping to get destroyed more and more so I can use them. Yeah.
That's so funny. It's almost like you're putting it's like that experience in each brush is almost held in that brush, and then you're adding to each painting, you're adding from that old brush.
True. Yeah. Yes, it's I know it's kind of, I mean, I should be saying good things about brush manufacturers and brands, but the point is that I think whichever brand it is, I still have my Rosemary's, and then they're like destroyed now, but I love them now because they don't have that like clean, neat edge, which makes my work a little more, I think, organic looking. I guess that's what it, yeah. So, and also like palette knives. I mean, I used to use I never used to use as much of palette knife work into my paintings, but now I'm using a lot more of palette knives as well, just for like if I'm doing something which which requires me to kind of paint a little more like boldly, hard edge, firm edge, something that's like a doorway or some like an edge, really crisp edge. Then I'm using those tools also. So yeah, those are the kind of new things that kind of but mostly brush work, a lot of brush work.
Yeah, we hear a lot about people really liking the on stretch canvases, if they learned on stretch canvases, like the little bend in the stretch canvas, where they as a, I mean, as just a feature. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but when you're used to something like that, that's something that we hear a lot because we're a panel manufacturer. Some people tell us, oh, I really miss the canvas spring, and of course we can't manufacture that in our panels. But it's one of those things that's maybe there's no real need for it, but it's just a preference thing. So that's very interesting.
Yeah. But because you have mostly everything on a panel, right? It's not stretched.
Everything we make, yeah, everything we make is on panels. And I'll go a little deeper into why we do that. Of course, some of the research we do that, but yeah, as my shirt says, everything lasts a little longer if it's on a rigid surface. So
yes.
That's the direction we went. So, what are some of the most frustrating challenges you've encountered from when you finish a painting to when a collector receives the art? So after you're done, you're ready to go either to a gallery or directly to a collector. Have you any experiences that are negative or just difficult?
You mean just transporting the work, or?
It could be transporting. I mean, obviously that's a common one. Maybe when the customer gets it and then they notice something, varnishing. I don't know. I think there's a lot of, even though that timeline is very short, I think there's a lot of, what I've heard is that there's a lot of things going on there. And so I'm interested in hearing if you had any experiences in that, or if that's not something you've experienced difficulties in.
No, I think knock on wood, like I've never really had anyone like any kind of trouble, but I can take a little moment to blame UPS that never seem to like ship it on time if that's a challenge. And sometimes it's really the shipping company. I mean, by the time the collector receives, and in fact this morning I got really a nice feedback from Arcadia's a gallery in New York, and then they had the collector in Europe who sent a really nice little message that they just received the artwork and they couldn't believe how it was great in person and how beautifully framed it was. And so no, Anton, sorry, you don't have much to say about that.
No,
and the canvases that the panels I've used, like I've noticed back in the day when I was stretching stuff, like when I stretched canvases, and I still do that occasionally for my larger pieces, but I've noticed that they sag. And then, if you haven't really got them like drum taut, they tend to have that sag. Now, luckily what's been happening is I've been pursuing people at the other end saying that, listen, I'm going to just like roll it up and send, because if people want to get their own paintings framed with their own framers or whatever taste differ, then it's easy for me to just like roll it in a scroll and just ship it out. Like if it's going to India or Europe or even within America, I'll just roll it. So I don't now get into this whole thing of sending a stretched canvas anymore, just because the temperature difference from here to somewhere else, it always has a sag. So back in the day, now that you asked me, I remember like having a couple of people turn around and say, oh, my painting is like, the painting you sent me is now like got a little bit of crease or it's sagging, that kind of issues. But now with my panels, it's really, there's no, unless, there's a shipping company, kind of a problem with something's damaged because of the way it was sent out or whatever. But otherwise, no, never really a problem.
Got it. Well, that was a great answer. I mean, I'm glad you're so lucky, and of course, we ship out a lot of stuff too. So So it's
Knock on
everyone's.
wood.
I think it's a percentage kind of thing. There's
Yeah, yeah.
probability that at some point something's going to happen. And
But you guys pack your panels so well, Anton. I've noticed, like, you guys really put those corners, on, those little, I guess, terraform corners on all the four corners, and you glue, like, you actually tape everything together, and just so there's no way they can get damaged. So that's, I mean, I really like the way you guys send it out. So yeah.
yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, those yellow corners are really, really nice. They're actually manufactured for BMW company for the
Oh, okay.
windshields.
Oh,
Because
is it? Okay.
they're big windshields, and so it used to be a problem, of course, with that's out of there's a lot of positives for panels. One of the negatives, of course, that the corners can get damaged
Right.
if a lot of pressure is applied, of course. So these corners are really helpful, and that's something actually we encourage all artists to also, just whenever we send them to you, they're fairly
Right.
expensive, so don't throw them away. Just make sure to save those corners. Those are you always use them, even if you're just storing it in your studio or if you're
Yeah.
shipping it out. They've reduced our completely our damage. We almost never get damaged panels now.
That's great. That's great. Yeah.
I have a couple more questions, but before I ask those questions, what I wanted to transition to is show some different surfaces that are out
Mm-hmm.
there. So right
Mm-hmm.
now we're in the process of doing some testing on all different kinds of products, so not just ours. Obviously, that's the best way to actually understand and compare different painting surfaces, to have them all in the same place. So, Suchi, if you hang tight, and of course, if you have any
Of
time,
course.
I
Yeah. Yeah.
want
Yeah. That's
to
great.
tell
Go
you what
for
I
it.
have. But I wanted to go through some of the painting surfaces that are easily available out there, and then I wanted to talk to you a little bit about them. So
Mm-hmm.
the very first one I'm gonna show here is we're gonna have it up on the big screen here in just a second. But also I'm gonna show you here. So this is a 3mm ACM panel. Disregard the numbers. This is for our testing purposes. But this is a thin 3mm 5x5" ACM panel. This is a standard products that we would put on. This is our standard panel, right? So if you notice on the back, you have an aluminum side. It's a mill finish side. On the front is a white mill finish, and this is what we actually put your canvas on. For instance, Suchitra's favorite, which is 532. We put a
Mm-hmm.
glue and then a canvas on top of that, and then that's what you actually paint on. So this is a 3mm ACM panel. Next, we have a 6mm ACM panel. This is what we call a grid panel. And actually, we'll talk a lot more about these particular panels tomorrow with Casey, because these are more designed for larger works. But that, just so you see here, this is a 6mm panel. It's a little thicker than the 3mm panel right here. Next, we have once again, an ACM panel, but it has a canvas on top of it. Okay, kind of hard to tell here, but this is it adds maybe a tiny amount to the thickness, but this is the thickness of the panel with the canvas on top of it. This is a copper panel. This is one of our Artefex copper panels. It's a composite panel called a CCM, which stands for copper composite material. So we have an aluminum veneer, a polyethylene core in the middle here, and then a copper veneer on the side here. That's what a copper one looks like. Next, we have a MDO. This is a medium density overlay. Okay, and you can kind of tell here, these are very common products. I'm going to show you everything that most artists would paint on. This MDO, it's much thicker. They come in different thicknesses. This particular one is a 1/2 inch. But you can paint on something like this. Obviously, there's no surface on this, so you need to prime this in some ways. This is a medium density overlay. Kind of light. I'd say this particular one is just a little heavier than an ACM panel, even though it's much thicker. Now, this is what I would say probably is one of the best wood products out there, and I'll show you why with some of the testing we've done. But this is called an HDO, which is a high density overlay. This particular product is not very common, so you have to buy this directly from the company in very large quantities. So this is not a very common product. Yeah, go ahead.
Anton, is it like, I want to try this one actually. I've been thinking, because this is not, is it like primed and sealed, or is it just sealed?
So this one's just sealed. So this is
Okay.
this is what called an HDO product. Yeah, it's sealed, so it actually has fibers inside it, and then they ply it together if you can.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so this, in terms of wood products, this is going to be
This is,
one of the best,
and it's
but
lighter. Is it lighter density, like in terms of
it's
weight?
not. So that's the only
Okay.
problem with this is that it's very heavy.
Oh,
So
okay.
the
Okay.
only problem, this is a 1/2 inch and 3/4 inch, and so that's kind of what I want to discuss, some of the different positives and negatives about this. This particular thing is very heavy. It's designed for like either concrete pouring or for signage outside. So they actually have
Oh,
good testing on it, and we've tested all these products. I'm going to show some data here in just a second. But we
okay.
don't sell any of these things. We sell only as ACM panels. But we have thought about possibly doing something like this in the future. So
Okay.
next we have an MDF. This is a very common material. I know a lot of artists have worked on this or worked on this before. MDF is medium density fiberboard. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
this is just a pulp, like a wooden pulp that's put together with glue in the middle of it. Okay, this is a fairly light product. It comes in different thicknesses. The particular one is a 1/2 inch. Next one is a birch plywood. Now there's tons of different plywoods. Okay, this particular plywood is probably going to be your best bet in terms of archivalness. This is a birch plywood, but there's a lot of inherent problems with this particular product as well. But even though I'm just going to show you, this is the best kind of plywood that we've seen, a birch or plywood.
Nice.
Uh, the last one here is a hardwood. And now this one, there's a ton of different kinds. Hardwoods, and the common one is masonite. There's a lots of different kinds of names for them, but this is
Okay.
very similar to what an MDF is, except for it's not as dense. There's more glue in it, and it's if you can see, it's a little more flimsy. It's actually, even in a small size like this, you could it's
So it's lighter, then it's lightweight too, right?
lightweight, but it's a little flimsy, so it's not as sturdy as some of the some of these other plywood
Right,
materials.
right, yeah.
Then the
Because
next,
my thing was about the other one, which I think two over.
yeah,
They're all sealed, but are they, again? Is it? Yeah, that one is. It's a good thickness, right? So in terms of warping, or like over the time, some boards warp. Like I've noticed some birch boards, and that's why I stopped using birch. But is that like thick enough not to warp?
yeah, that's a great question, and in fact, I'm actually going to answer all those things in just a
Okay,
little bit. And what I want to do is the short answer is yes, but I want to show you some of the data that we have to show
okay,
why they warp, right? So basically, all wood products absorb moisture even if they're sealed. Okay, so and there's other failures that could come from that, including a failure of the glue. Not there's a certain timeline for these things. A lot of these products are
mm-hmm.
designed for houses or for certain time limits, right? So a lot of them will be rated for a certain amount of time, right? So the idea is that a lot of these products are repurposed for artwork, right? So they're not
Okay.
designed for artists, they're designed for other things, and other things might not need as long of a timeline as an artwork would. So
Right.
those are some of the wood products. The next we have here is what we're going to call, I'm not going to say any names on here, so I'm going to just call them competitor panels. This is a competitor panel here. This is a hardboard panel, okay? So this is like the last piece of wood we saw, but with a very thin hardboard on it, okay? So this is, excuse me. So this is a hardboard panel here. This is another hardboard panel from a competitor. This actually has a canvas on top of it. This is a very thin piece of hardwood here. This is another one. This is an even thinner hardboard. This is a different kind of hardboard. It looks like it's a little, this looks like what the masonite would look like. Very thin here. Just like this. And then one more. These are all the ones that I showed you are from different companies that have different hardboard panels here. This is another hardboard panel here. This is very thin. It's actually gallery wrapped, and there's a canvas on top of it. So those are basically the most common materials that we see out there. Of course, there's other ones. There's cradle wood panels. There's lots of stretch canvas. The stretch canvas we don't even really We don't really even talk about stretch canvas because stretch canvas has a lot of known problems. I think it's a lot. Almost every artist I've worked on stretch canvas, they know that they have to restretch things. There's different problems that come up with it. So I mean, for this particular test, we haven't done any stretch canvases, even though in the future we probably will add those on as more of just kind of proving what we already know about that. But those are the main products. I wanted to ask you a couple follow-up questions before I go into the research, Suchitra, if that's okay. So
yeah, go for it.
Can you tell me the painting surfaces that you used to use out of some of these ones that I said, and then what you use now, and kind of some of your experiences with some of the other painting surfaces?
I think I think over the time I've always stuck to linen. Like I just haven't really painted on cotton duck or any other canvas, or have been using just a lot of that fine, portrait grade linen, and I got used to that. But there definitely panels is like I said, it was always stretched canvases before, so it was more the need getting rolls and trying to save money. So obviously trying to stretch yourself. I was doing that for a good 7-8 years, and then until I started coming across all these other panel manufacturers like there's Raymar and other people as well. But I think over the years I've just I've stuck to this only because I think it lends to that brush, like I said, that marriage between my brushwork as well as the way I paint. I think that quality in the way it looks visually when I'm done with the painting, it's more to do with the fine portrait grade linen, especially the lead primed. There used to be an oil primed linen as well, like double or triple oil primed linen that I used to get online. And I think now I like the feel that panels are so much more easier to deal with. You just have something ready to go. I mean, it's expensive, but at the end of the day, again, if you're doing something for a commission or a client, you're sending it off, you want like the best thing that's archival. You don't want to, take risks on doing something which, again, like cheaper, materials out there, and then you want to compromise. So I've got used to painting. Even I think the biggest I've gone on a panel is probably about 30 by 20. I haven't gone anything bigger than that. I think that was a year and a half back when I had a commission that I think I got it from you. So I mean, I think it was maybe 36 by 24. Yes, that's the biggest. And I've noticed that like the bigger you go, like there are other artists who I know who actually paint really large on panels. There is a beauty that lends to painting on stretch canvas, the drum when it's tight, and you're like, the way I paint, I fence and paint because I'm standing. So I like the little give that there's a little dance between the canvas and the brush. So I like that. I miss that on flat panels, but I think it's so much more convenient to do it on flat panels, because even shipping, I saw a question that was about shipping and how to put it out there, and I think that's easy when you have panels to deal with. So yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah, we make them up to 5 feet by 10 feet, and tomorrow we're talking to Casey. He's a lot of really large paintings. I mean the biggest,
and they're all in panels, right? Like Casey's painting on a panel too, isn't it? The large pieces.
Yep. Casey's an ambassador for Artefex. I think he uses us exclusively as well. We'll talk a lot more in depth tomorrow, but I'm definitely going to show you really quickly. So besides the 3mm ACM panels, this is the 6mm ACM panel. It's what we call a grid panel. As you can see all the way through this one, it has actually a grid in the middle of the panel, and this gives it rigidity. A lot of rigidity up to 5 feet by 10 feet.
It's great. I mean, I've painted on this one for, I think it was a 30 by 20 that I did for my solo show for Meyer Gallery. I painted this floral piece that was with peonies across a window and with a hummingbird, and I love the feel of just the way it was sturdy. But what happened was that was one of those challenges I came across, Anton, where I sent it out of the gallery, and I was trying to use an older frame. And to fit this, painting into this old frame, and then because I actually ordered the size accordingly, so I thought, and then it was like just that much less, like one 1/16, I don't know, 1/16, something like that. And they said, okay, I said, go ahead. And I gave the boys the go ahead to go like chop it off.
Yep.
And they said, I don't know, we don't want to mess with your painting. I said, like, just go for it. Don't worry. You have to take it off to fit into the frame. Go for it. And they said that, I mean, it was not bad. If it's professional, you have the tools, you're able to like slice off, like how for like gator foam panels, you can easily like butter like through the knife and just, break the panel. And this, I think they managed to do it, which also gives me that option for some reason that I changed my mind and I want to make it like a slightly smaller or whatever, and
Absolutely.
that was easy. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, you definitely can cut them pretty easily. We actually talk to people all the time about this. A lot of times artists will even come to us and they say, kind of going back to what you're saying, they're in a different stage in their career. They're like, I just want to make my own ACM panels. Can you kind of help me walk through? And so we walk through that all the time. And I think actually it's interesting that you said that, is that that you used to stretch your canvases because of that was to save money. And that's very true, because I think what we see is that there is a time where it makes sense, because you have the time, you're maybe not selling your work, you have the time to delve deep into your tools and maybe make it yourself in some ways, right? But then at some point it goes to the 4 or 5 hours you're spending priming your canvases. Could you have spent that time on actually painting instead? And then, is that time worth it for you to spend that? And I think, it's different for everybody, but artists comes to that point in their career, if their career gets to a certain point, is that they decide that maybe I don't need to spend my time on certain things, and I can move on to just dealing with.
And I think, if I can interrupt, Anton, I think also like, to be fair, obviously these panels, they rack up like expensive, you keep, that's all you keep painting on, it's going to be expensive over time. So what I've also tried to, like, just for our viewers, in case, so they understand that you can have a balance, because some paintings you don't want to always paint on the most expensive panel, and even if it's a study or whatever. And then I will actually, get like a little more of a, I just get down to doing these little, putting that, sealing the, what do you call it? Like, take the canvas and just like pin it on my board. I don't even like stretch them, I'll just pin it so that I can just get to work. Like, I don't want to deal with, panel,
like a study or
stretching.
Like
Right. So if you can't afford all the time trying to buy, Artefex panels or whatever it is, try and do that in between. And then you can always like switch out depending on the kind of project you're working with. If it's a commission, if it's a serious painting you want to do, do the best, like do it on a panel that's how I work. Like, I go ahead and order a bunch of panels from you guys. And then it's like, I know these are kind of going to be my serious paintings. And then there's always the studies that you want to do, which you don't want to spend on like a $30-$40 panel, right? So then what I do is I just like, cut out a canvas and pin it on my big board that I have on the easel, and then just start painting, because I just don't want to deal with like, okay, now I have to stretch it or whatever. It's more like time spent doing it. So just something Absolutely. That people can.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I think especially with studies and things like that. Like I said,
there
comes a point where every artist makes a decision for themselves. So
yeah.
Last question, and actually, I'm noticed that there's a lot of questions in the chat. We're going to answer all those questions with Suchitra. We're going to go wait for the end before we sign off. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can, depending on what time it is. So just so everyone knows, we are seeing your questions. It's not that we're ignoring you. We will absolutely bring on some more questions. I have one more question before I move on to the presentation of testing the materials. Do you believe that there is a perfect painting surface for you, or do you choose a certain surface depending on this different stage in your career, which I know you already answered? Maybe each series, like a specific series or a gallery open you're doing, or is it even as granular as each painting you choose a different thing or different surface and different tools for that painting?
Yeah, I think it can be a combination of a lot of things. For me, I think the lead primed, the smoother surface lends to that quality, like I said, the visual effect I get from my personality, which is more the fearless, spontaneous. I like to be direct and kind of open with the way I'm like handling my seeing. And I think that for me, for those moments when I'm painting in that state of mind, I definitely like surfaces that are a little more, I don't have to deal working, don't have to like have a challenge working with. So for me, the lead prime is less of a challenge. I mean, barely a challenge, right? Because it like gives me that beautiful buttery brushwork on the thing. Then there are times when I want to sort of, like I said, studies, right? Like I want to get like a little bit of a dry brush technique, or if I want to try something or experiment, and then I'm using like surfaces that have a little more tooth. And I think that's where I go and I start experimenting with different surfaces. And then there's like other slicker surfaces also, which again, they're all great for studies for me, but I think it's a combination of your personality at the end of the day, Anton, to be honest. If you have a certain type of a persona and the quality, the way you like to paint, you'll find that surface that like kind of resonates with your style, with your way of doing it. Because if I try to paint like somebody else, and because that surface is nicer and I'm going to buy that because they paint on that, I don't think it works, because you've got to try a bunch of things before you really like stick to something. And for me, it's been the either the triple oil primed or the lead primed surfaces that have really given me that nothing to deal with except just get there and paint,
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And I know a lot of that question was reiterating some of the stuff that we already talked about, but I still thought that was interesting to see how your approach is. And of course, it is. I think it is personality. Some people are type A and they want everything perfect every time, and maybe some people like to explore a lot more and have
right.
fun.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
I think there's probably a panel out there for everybody in that way.
True, absolutely true.
Yeah. So I want to move on to talking a little bit about some of the testing that we do. I have a PowerPoint that I'm going to go through very quickly here, and I'm going to show you some data talking about the products and the panels that I showed a little bit earlier. All of these are labeled because they're all in our study. The first thing I want to say about the study is, of course, this is a preliminary pilot study. Okay, so there are a lot of tests like this done for ACM panels, or done for hardwood panels, or done for plywood panels, right? But they test that particular product in a certain environment, and then that's what they present, right? Because for them, they're just talking about their own products, and that's really what they need to show is how their particular product reacts to a certain environment. So what we wanted to do is combine all these products into one. So we'll have our ACM panels, we'll have hardwood panels, we have plywood, and everything else, everything that I showed you, plus a couple that I didn't show you because because there's a lot of more competitor stuff too. But basically, we want to put them all in the same environment, in the same place, and then test them all in that way. So next slide, please. So prior research and anecdotal evidence. So prior research and accelerated wicking tests shows that panel swelling is a real threat to artwork in terms of swelling and expansion. Direct anecdotal evidence has shown that customers have experienced dramatic loss of their artwork from long-term storage issues and basement flooding, while many studies have looked at ACM and wood panels independently. Studies combining the two under the same conditions seem absent from literature. And so the most common problems that of course we hear, and I actually have some stories that I'll probably talk about tomorrow, is in the basement, right? So let's say you have your artwork in a basement and it floods. That's worst case scenario. That's that's not going to happen to everybody, but that could happen, and there are examples of that happening before. Another one is, let's say your artwork is next to a window, right? So an open window, let's say that means that relative humidity, temperature is going to fluctuate pretty drastically over and over again, right? And so that's a more common one. Another one is, let's say your artwork is next to a fireplace, and as fireplaces go, if you turn on your fireplace and turn it off, that's going to dramatically change the relative humidity. So that's really what we're trying to achieve with this particular project, and that's what you'll see here, what we simulated. Next slide, please. So preliminary panel studies, preliminary control studies involving Artefex ACM and copper panels versus popular brands of hardwoods. Further humidity testing to test the extremes of our panels versus hardwood and competitor panels. And then we built a humidity and temperature control chamber to allow two specific ranges of control Pilot studies serve as proof of concept for the research and exploration. So basically, we're going to have two things that we're going to test for, which is the most important ones, which is relative humidity and temperature. Those are also the most common problems to for warping, which is what you asked about a little bit earlier, Suchitra. And most common environmental changes. Of course, there's others like acidity in the air, all different kinds of other things in our environment, depending on if you're in LA or in Montana. There's gonna be different things out there in the air that are gonna all affect different things. But we can't really control for those things as of yet. So the two that we chose as our test as what we test for is relative humidity and temperature. Next slide, please. So this is the room design. As you can see in that picture, this is a shelf rack, and every panel there is hung by little screws. We created a custom control humidity and temperature environment, utilized positive and negative feedback loops to help maintain steady conditions. System included humidifiers and dehumidifiers, as well as heaters and air conditioners working in tandem as counterbalances. Quick purge systems were put in place involving quick exhaust intake fans. So that way, we are in California, right? So we're in a warehouse in California. It is really hot in here sometimes. It gets up to 80 degrees. Sometimes and the relative humidity is usually pretty low in California. So obviously we have to have for different environments, we have to really have a lot of controls for that. That's why we have exhaust and stuff like that. So everything's controlled in that way. Next slide, please. So here are some humidifiers, some dehumidifiers. Next slide, please. Here's heaters and air conditioners. This is, and this will make a little more sense. I just wanted to show everybody how this is done. Next slide, please. Measurement systems. So of course we have on the left here, we have a scale that we weigh everything on. That's gonna measure how much water, moisture each panel has absorbed. We also have a ruler. We have calipers to measure the depth of each panel if it's swelling. That's the most common problems. And then on the right side, you see that we have two different measurements for relative humidity and for temperature. And this is 24/7 monitored. So we actually have all this whole test recorded. So at any point we can refer back to any point in the process, and we can see like this is how much the relative humidity was. This is the panels. So that way we have proof that these panels were in this place the entire time. We didn't throw one in a bucket of water and take it out or anything like that. Everything was controlled in the same way. We have 24/7 monitoring of this particular subject. Next slide, please. So panel preparation and experimental design. Each of our panels and the wood panels were cut to dimensions out of 5 by 5, each noted by samples with an A designation, and 5 inches by 10 inches as noted with a B designation. So that way we wanted to see different lengths of panels. Obviously, that's going to make a difference in terms of different points of contact where moisture and temperature can change. So we tried two different sizes. Panels without either designation were simply 5 by 5 inch panels or 3 millimeter ACM or 4 millimeter copper panels. Obviously, those are ours, so we didn't label those. But we actually do have other competitor ACM panels in there as well, just for references. They should be all similar, but of course, there's hundreds of different manufacturers of ACM panels as well. So we want to test for that as well. Competitor panels came in a variety of sizes of what was available at the time. So competitor panels are a little larger than any other panels, but it's just what was available at the time. Each panel was cataloged into a key, had 1 to 2 hanging hooks attached to the longitudinal side of the panel, had its massive dimensions preliminary measured. And so that way we didn't glue anything on, we didn't protrude, we didn't protect any of the surfaces. We actually just screwed in a little hook and then hung it everywhere, as you saw on the previous slides there. And all the panels to be tested were to be collected and placed in a room temperature in a storage in identical boxes and left to acclimate for 1 week to reach uniform storage conditions. And of course, this is important. This is basically everything was put into one room and set aside to have the same beginning measurements, right? So we didn't have things all over the place. We didn't just cut them. We had it all sit in the same place, cut two sides for a week beforehand. Here's measuring and data logging. Each panel was to be measured at regular intervals over the course of 2 weeks. So we have different tests. Right now we're in stage 2. We've done 2 months worth of testing so far. This is going to be a continuous test though. So we're never actually going to stop testing, same as your panels and your paintings are never going to stop deteriorating or or being somewhere, right? Unless you throw them away. So at this point, that we're going to continue doing the same testing. So we're going to continue to do different kinds of tests like this. Panels will without IDA designation was simply 5x5 panels. So competitor panels came in a variety of sizes, and all the panels to be tested were collected and placed in the same room temperature as the same room temperature altogether. Next slide, please.
Mm-hmm.
So the control studies aimed to control was to analyze panel deviation in mass and dimensional change in reasonable panel conditions. Artefex panels tested were plain 3 mm ACM panels, 4 mm copper panels, 6 mm ACM panels, 537 canvas, 531 canvas, which is the one similar to the one that you like, Suchitra. The 531 is just a little heavier weave.
Right.
538 canvas with 3 mm panel, and 513 canvas, which is the cotton canvas, which is the thinnest canvas we have. It's the one I actually showed a little bit earlier. It's very, very thin. And of course, then some of the wood panels that we talked about, hardwoods, which is ODF, which is or HDF, high density overlay, MDF, plywood, and less porous solution to canvas artwork at the cost of weight increase. So they're less porous. Some of the thicker wood panels of the wood panels are less porous, but they're much heavier, right? So it just depends on what you're valuing. I think every artist has a different value system, right? Is it the heaviest thing that you want? Is it lightweight? Is it rigid? Do I have to restretch?
Right.
How easy is it to skip? Can I roll it up? Right? There's a lot of different variations into that, but particularly in wood products, obviously the more dense, the heavier it gets. Panels are subjected to a core humidity range of 30 to 60% relative humidity, as recommended by many experts as the ideal range for living as well. So basically, the control is there just to see what if your artwork was put in a perfect condition, nothing, no crazy changes. Maybe it was put into a just in a perfect museum situation. That's what this would account for. So here's control studies for Artefex panels. Average Artefex panel change was 0.027 of a percentage point. Most common sources of change was difference in depth of the panel. So basically, the panels that had canvas on them had the most change, which makes sense, right? So that's where the moisture would most be absorbed. So the first panel was a plain ACM panel of solid core. The ones that showed the highest change by far were the ones with the canvas. Speculated that the solid core of sample one may be more apt to hold water in pores as compared to 6 mm tubular structure grade panels. So as you can see here, 1A was the 3 mm plain ACM panel. There was a little bit of change. What we consider this is most likely of either moisture that's left on the panel, because we don't take it off when we measure it. So maybe a condensed on it. As you can see, as 4, 5, and 6, those had the most changes. Now I will say this is a graph showing the most change was 0.05 of a percentage point. Okay, so or 50th of a percentage point. So it's very, very small changes, but there are changes that we can record, and the most changes happened on the 537, 531, and 538, which is the canvas panels. And the changes that we're seeing here, this is how much more weight was the weight and difference. So 50 percentage points in weight and difference in this one. All the way to almost no changes in weight difference from the 6 mm plain ACM panels that you see over on 2A and 2B. Next slide, please. So this is the control study for wood panels. So average wood panel change was 0.057 percentage points. Most common source of change was difference in depth of the panel. So in these ones, the most common change here is the expansion of the panels. Okay, so lateral expansion of or expansion of the swelling of the actual of the wood product. Relatively apparent positive trend between surfaces, areas, and percentage change. No noticeable warping or deformation of panels themselves, even at differing depths and lengths. So what we see here, this is control. This is between normal, between 30 and 60%. There isn't a change in terms of swelling or noticeable warping. Okay, so we have pictures for all this. I'm not going to show pictures of this particular thing right now, but basically just there isn't any changes in that. So if it's put in a perfect condition, after 2 weeks or after 2 weeks of this one, there was no noticeable change of that even though there is a twofold change in from ACM panels. All wood panels were exposed and uncanvassed. And that's the last thing I want to say about these particular ones, is that there was no canvas on top of these particular panels, right? So
Okay.
there's a little bit of difference there. So if there was a canvas on these wood panels, we would see probably the same amount of swelling on top of the canvas as you would see in the ACM panels. Okay, next slide, please. So these are control studies, Artefex versus wood panels. So average Artefex panel change was 0.027 percentage points. Average wood panel change was 0.057 percentage points in terms of total weight added after this. So as you can see, I mean, more than twofold difference in overall change in panel dimensions. This is obviously as expected. Wood, wood, as we all know, will absorb moisture over time. But it's nice to actually see a percentage put to that number to see that it's almost double in terms of wood products. Overall, wood seems more susceptible to environmental influences across most surfaces, though some outliers do exist that require further exploration. Possibly measuring bias may have existed between observers as a limitation, as a small shift in interpretation has a dramatic effect at the millimeter scale. And so that's actually more going back to this is our preliminary studies. So we have two people testing this particular thing, going off different days. So now for the next study that you'll see, it was one person doing all the recording, just in case there was a bias. At this point, it doesn't seem like it, because we only see it on one particular product here, which is let me see, 11A. And 11A, I believe, is the one that you were talking about earlier. Is the high density, let's see, HDO, which is high density overlay. But that's the wood product, and in their description, that's what they describe as the best kind of wood panel, because they use the best kinds of woods, the best kinds of glues, and then the process of manufacturing is just impeccable. Of course, those are very expensive. They're actually twice as expensive to get as ACM panels. So there's lots of different drawbacks to that, and they're kind of hard to get. But it's a possibility that if wood is what you're looking for in this particular study, it shows the same thing, that those particular wood products might be better. Go ahead, Malcolm. Next, please. So high humidity and temperature conditions. So considerations of humidity and temperatures are crucial to canvas paintings on more traditional art surfaces. High humidity and temperatures are especially important for storage conditions and the longevity of a piece of artwork. Panels are subjected to high humidity, 70 to 90%, and temperatures of 85 degrees or higher for a period of 2 weeks. Conditions and measures were tightened since a control trials with only one observer taking measurements to minimize any bias that may exist. So this is important. So basically, this is going to 70, 90%. I actually just looked up what the relative humidity was like in Florida last week. It was between 80 and 90% throughout both at night and during the day. And the temperature was quite a bit higher than 85 degrees Fahrenheit. So this is basically what Florida would be like during most of the year, what New York would be like, during the summer, some summer months, what Montana and some of the Ohio where I went to college, it was very high relative humidity throughout the whole day. So this is, even though it seems really high, 70-90% with 85% degrees in Fahrenheit, this is more common than you think in terms of what conditions your paintings could be subjected to. Next slide, please. High heat, high relative humidity Artefex panels. Average Artefex panel change with 0.001 percentage points. Most common sources of change was difference in mass, although negligible at 0.006% change. And even extreme humidity and temperatures, Artefex panels showed no visible signs of warping, with no raised corners or torsional distortions when applied to a flat surface. And for this, we actually will show you some pictures later on. But for now, just so you see, this is a 2-week test that we did here. And in 2 weeks, we had it at a steady relative humidity, steady temperature. And as you see here, almost no changes except for the 538, which had a 0.35% change in the weight in that. And of course, it's still a very small. It's mostly very, very small as you can compare it to some of the other to wood product and competitor panels. As you can see, that's the only one that showed any noticeable change in weight. Next slide, please. This is a wood products here. So average wood panel change was 0.019 percentage points. So more than 1%. Most common source of change was difference in a mass of the panel. And interestingly, the larger panels seem to gain less percentage mass than the smaller panels, but this could be attributed to the heavier nature requirements of long exposure wicking to permeate the surface. And so basically what this is saying that maybe large panels would take longer to have water permeate through it. So we'll continue doing these tests, and we'll see if this is consistent with large panels and small panels. That said, 10A and 10B did not follow this trend, which will need to be explored further in future studies. And once again, 10A and 10B is that HDO, high density overlay product, which is the best kind of wood you can get. And that one didn't show the same problems that the other wood products had. This is still small. The wood panels changed an average by a factor of 19-fold when compared to Artefex panels. So even though the change is very small that you see here, it changed 19 times more than what Artefex panels changed. And we will show you some pictures of what that looks like physically, because it's a little easier to understand that when you actually see the results. Next slide, please. So this next one is competitor panels, high heat, high relative humidity for competitor panels. Average competitor panels changed at 0.027 percentage points. Most common source of change was difference in mass of the panel, following the clear trend of wicking moisture seen by all panels in the set. Some fared reasonably with some conditions. There were some that were clearly less resistant to the high heat humidity conditions. Most panels experienced significant warping by day 3 of the experiment, which is probably the most interesting part of this experiment that we saw, is that within 3 days of the test, most panels that warped bad. So it's hard to say how long things will take. Sometimes you're like, oh, maybe if it's shipping or something like that, you don't know what it's subjected to. Maybe it's just 2-3 hours. Who knows? Maybe does that even affect it? Or if I had it outside for a day, does that really matter? So in this particular thing, within 3 days of this experiment, we saw significant warping already in some of these panels. Only a third of the panels came close to reaching the range of Artefex panels in terms of maintenance, integrity of the test. And although 0.02% seems like a small number of change, 0.02% change in the weight seems like a small number, we noticed that the percentage of visible change was more material dependent, as even some of the more hardier panels experienced warping under visible inspection. Next slide, please. So here is a competitor panel. This is a hardwood panel with a canvas backing on it. And although panel 16 had a small degree of warping, we found that this type of panel tested in a few varieties warped considerably compared to other panels in the trial group. The average percentage was 0.004, which is not the biggest, but as you can see here, you can see the warping on the left side and the right side. Next slide, please. Here's panel 17. This is another competitor panel. It's a different competitor. It was noticeably different manufacturer and showed a similar degree of physical warping as compared to panel 17, supporting the notion that panel material and manufacturing process may be a significant factor in warping. The average percentage change was 0.054. So this was the one that changed the most, and also it had warping in it, as you can see there. Next slide. Panel 19 experienced a higher amounts of torsional warp than most of the panels, while still only displaying a considerable amount of longitudinal and lateral warping as well. The average percentage change was 0.02%. So this panel showed the most warping. This is the canvas panel with a warp around racking on it, warp around in it, and it showed probably the most amount of warping within 3 days. Next slide, please. The worst panel by far was panel 20, another variety of panel manufactured by the same company as panel 16. So this is the very first picture that we showed you. This is one seemed to physically warp the most. The average percentage change was 0.018. So even though it wasn't the most, didn't change the most in terms of weight, it did change the most in terms of warping. And something like this would be basically unusable in terms of just painting on directly. But then this is not even considering after you've painted on it, what could happen to your painting in that way.
True.
Next slide. Okay. So summary, Artefex panels outperform wood panels in both conditions, as well as competitor panels in high heat and high humidity conditions. Validation of minimization of any observer bias based on our preliminary data. Clear limitation to this study is competitor panels need to be tested in control condition environments as well to see if they will warp in the same parameters as well. Although not always apparent, panels can be significantly altered in mass as can be attributed to swelling of panels itself. And even these small changes were observed to have detrimental effects under the right conditions. So basically, the final remark on this particular study is that even though if the weight hasn't changed that much, that doesn't mean that the panel hasn't gone through some kind of transformation. Because some of the wood products, for instance, like some of the plywoods, they added more weight, but they didn't warp as much because they are designed to have for those kind of expansion or contraction. While some of the hardwoods, which is some panels such as this, that have a canvas just attached to them, those will go through the most amount of warping over time. Next slide, please. So that's basically, hopefully that answers a lot of your questions, Suchitra, when you asked me about what is the difference between some of these surfaces.
Yeah.
That's the basic proof of what of concept of what we're doing. The next thing, of course, we're going to be doing is we're going to really be going into getting some materials that are going to really keep a consistent consistent variability. So in other words, we're going to have all these products continuously going through these testing. So this is just the first 2 months, but we're never going to really stop. And in the future, we're going to probably look at a unit like this that's going to have a much more consistent variability in that. So that was the end of that presentation. I think we had some other questions, Suchitra, that I'd like to get to.
Sure. Yeah.
Ton in the chat here. So
yeah,
let me see if I can start from the beginning here.
Okay.
Yeah, on the panel, these slides. Let's see. I'm sorry.
Aida Garrity, she had a question about layers.
Yeah. So Aida Garrity had a question about layers. Let me see if I can find that here.
So there were these questions on the chat window, right?
Yes. Here's one. Do you usually work only on one layer for several layers? Please explain your process. Thank you very much. This is from.
Well, I do like layering while I'm painting, so it's not like a wait for it to finish and then layer on. It's more about like just trying to do it in one go. So yeah.
Got it. Okay. Let me see if there's any other questions on there.
There was one about shipping, I think, and then how do you ship your work or something? Or the panels are easy to ship. Yeah, I think it is actually very simpler to ship because it's already like rigid. The way I pack it, of course, is I use those corners that you send them with, so that it has like something that doesn't touch the a cover that I put on top of the painting. So I use like I wrap the entire dried painting in a parchment paper, and then I put those corners on. And then I have a cardboard that I cut to size, and then I put that in a box that can stay. So, and I bubble wrap the whole thing like that. So there's enough room between the painted surface of the panel and the cardboard on top. And that's how I ship it.
Got it. Very good. Very good. There's another question about is HDO very expensive from Pang? And yes, unfortunately, HDO is very expensive. It's not very easy to find, but it is a possibility to find out there. There's actually a pretty good, I would say, explanation specifically on wood products and on paintingbestpractices.com. I think they actually have a whole lesson talking about different wood products and what's best on. They go deeper into that. So I would suggest if you have more interest in wood products, go to paintingbestpractices.com, and they have a lot of explanation. They have a good lesson on that there. And I think it looks like some of the other questions were answered by the moderator, and some of them were also answered through some of our other conversations. So
okay. Are these available in India? Someone's asking. I think Sai is asking, are these available in India? Well, they're not available yet, right? But they're online. They're available online to be shipped to India.
They are. They can be shipped to India. We actually have shipped them quite a bit to India. I would say the best way, also, whenever you order, just contact us directly, because we offer special discounts for international artists. We recognize that there's duties and all that.
Yes,
please,
yes.
if you're an international artist, please go ahead and contact us, maybe directly either.
And the next time I'm doing a workshop with my art buddy from India, Pramod Kurlekar, we will end up using. I was talking about collaborating with you so I can take some of the panels and go to India, and then whoever wants to get them and wants to try those out, that'll be a great way to, maybe you can offer a discount for the students for the workshops. That'll be a great way to get Artefex into India.
Absolutely, yes, that we absolutely can do that.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, Suchitra, thank you so much for joining us. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for being an ambassador for Artefex as well. You are an amazing artist, and of course, some of the knowledge you've brought to us about using the panels is really valuable, and very very thankful for that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anton. Thank you for having me. This is an
Absolutely.
amazing talk. All right.
Yeah. And
bye, everyone. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say is that, of course, this is one of 3 talks. So today we talked about specifically about the materials and some of our testing. And tomorrow we're going to go deeper into with Casey Childs, and he's going to talk about how he uses larger format panels, something that Suchitra talked about as well. And we'll show different possibilities for that. We'll talk about the weights of all these different things, the storability, and all these other things as well. So make sure to join us tomorrow again as well. And if you want to check out Olga's talk, that was yesterday. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Suchitra.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.